Now, let's switch it up a little bit. Usually I'm giving you the good old King James first, and then I'm giving you what they've done to it. Now we're going to play the other way around. I'm going to give you what the Thomas Nelson publishers want you to have. They want you to have the Catholic-friendly New King James Version with their fancy logo. Then the Lord appeared to him by the terebinth tree. Wow, terebinth tree. I guess terebinth is a word that must have replaced some old archaic word that we would no longer use anymore. So what word did that replace? It replaced plains. Okay, well, after all, maybe these guys at Thomas Nelson, maybe they know what they're doing. You know, they're professionals. Won't question them. Here we have that showing up again in Genesis 35. It's terebinth tree. Oh, terebinth tree. Okay. Well, is it going to be plains again? No, it's oak. They replaced that very hard to understand archaic word oak. Now, I would think the word oak is much easier, but once again, don't question these guys. They know what they're doing. Here we have terebinth showing up again in Hosea chapter 4. So is it going to replace oak? Well, maybe not, because you'll notice just a few words before terebinths, there's the word oak. Oak, popular, and terebinths. Well, if it's not going to replace oak, what is this fabulous word terebinth going to replace? The very hard to understand word elms. I don't think these guys at Thomas Nelson know their trees. They're using this word terebinth all over the place, kind of like it's a lohawk. It has, 500 different meanings. Oh, you're just being nitpicky. Oh, well, maybe. In Titus chapter 1, we have the word dissipation. Wow. Now, I'm sure that everyone has heard of the word dissipation. Who could forget the terrible dissipations of the 1960s and the Watts dissipation? Ah, yes, that's right. The terrible and old-fashioned word riot has just been replaced with dissipation. Now ask yourself, which word was easier to understand? And in that same verse, insubordination replaces the word unruly. Dissipation or insubordination. How many syllables is that? Instead of riot, unruly. Which one of these is really easier to understand? I'm going to say that old-fashioned one. I know. I wouldn't have believed it either until I saw it. 1 Kings chapter 1. She came to Jerusalem with a very great retinue. And all this other stuff. Retinue. What is a retinue? Hey, little Billy, little Mary, out of kindergarten class, what's retinue? Do they know? What old-fashioned archaic word did retinue replace? Train. Okay, she came to Jerusalem with all this stuff, followed behind her, like a caravan, a whole train of it. Not a choo-choo train, but just a train of followers. Like the train from your wedding gown, okay? A retinue. Wow, do you have to be a scholar to understand these new verses? I'm afraid you do. Night creature. Oh, let's read this first. The wild beast of the desert shall also meet with the jackals, and the wild goat shall bleat to its companion. Also the night creature shall rest. Ooh, what is this? Is this a boogeyman? The night creature. Ooh. Wow. What did they replace? A screech owl. I know. I can't believe it either. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Satraps. Wow, what in the world is a satrap? I'm sure everybody's heard of one, right? You mean you haven't heard of the word satrap? Why, they've got one of these running around in England. You've heard of Satrap Charles. Yep. Prince. Prince Charles. Or if it's plural, princes. But which of these is easier to understand? Is my old-fashioned Bible that you don't like, is it easier to understand than satraps? Well, I know the answer to that. Oh, and by the way, don't be too hard on them with the word satraps. They're just trying to agree wholeheartedly with their good old friends, the Jehovah's Witnesses, in the New World Translation. Okay? I mean, sure, they translate John chapter 1, verse 1 just a tad different. But other than that, they're pretty much a Jehovah's Witness Bible. I'm sorry. Somebody had to say it. Genesis 9:9, descendants. How many syllables is that? That replaces seed, a one-syllable word, which is harder. Now, Ruth chapter 4, verse 5, we have perpetuate. Perpetuate. Apparently, young boys and girls couldn't handle the phrase raise up. But they can apparently understand perpetuate. Now, if I told you early on that one of these was going to be easier to understand, which one would you have thought was going to be easier? Well, it's my old-fashioned one. Oh, they should run aground on these Syrtis sands. Wow, does this sound like an archaic word to you? Syrtis sand? What is a Syrtis sand? Oh, it's quicksand. Yeah. It replaced that old archaic word quicksand. Distressing replaces evil. I could do a bunch of these. I'm not going to. I think a few of these just speak for itself. I don't need to exhaust myself or you. Here's the Flesch Kincaid grade level indicator. You'll have, by the way, KJV, that stands for King James Version. Then next in the second column is NIV. Then there's the New American Standard. Then the TEV, that stands for Today's English Version, otherwise known in America as the Good News Bible, formerly known as the Good News for Modern Man, big long phrase. And finally, the Thomas Nelson Catholic-friendly New King James. Now, you have a grade level here. Genesis chapter 1, you have Malachi chapter 1, Matthew chapter 1, and Revelation chapter 1. Now, in all these, on occasion, you may have a newer translation that will, just barely be a little bit easier. But on the whole, that old-fashioned King James Bible is easier to read for grade levels. Now, if I'd have shown you this chart at the very first thing we started talking about, you wouldn't have believed me. You wouldn't have believed me, but it's true. Now you have a better chance of believing me because I've shown you a few examples of just how rough these translations can be. Because they've gone to a dictionary, they can't use these simple words, so they have to use another word that kind of means the same thing. Well, you can do that because our language is very broad, but you're making it harder. And all the time you're making these new versions, you're claiming that it's easier to understand. Now, finally, after all these years, we can understand God's Word. Baloney. I don't agree with you. No wonder in our Bible we have this verse, 2 Corinthians 3:12. Seeing then that we have such hope, we use great plainness of speech. Well, I would agree with him. I wonder what a newer translation might say to that. Therefore, having such a hope, we use great boldness in our speech. I'll say you do. You're pretty bold at many of the things you do with God's Word. What do the Southern Baptist Holman Christian Standard Version? Notice I'm using these little copyright symbols by them because they are copyrighted. Therefore, having such a hope, we use great boldness. Boldness in what? Well, doesn't matter. We're just bold. Okay.